Okay, this video is for our first lab in AP Chemistry. There are two parts to it. The first part, we are going to be dehydrating about 1 gram of the copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the analytical scale and I'm going to mass out about 1 gram, and the camera's going to follow me, about 1 gram of the copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate. So I'm going to open the scale door, put the weigh boat in, close it, and hit the 0 button so that it zeroes out. And then I'm going to grab my copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate, and remember what I'm doing is I'm just going to add a little bit at a time till I get to about 1 gram. And that was too much, so 1 scoop was too much. Remember, it's bad practice to kind of do this, but sort of we have to sometimes to make it work. Still a little too much. So that's about 1 gram. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to close the door and write down that number on my data table. And whenever we do experiments, we also want to mass our empty containers because we oftentimes can't scrape out our final product. So again, I'm going to close the door, hit 0, and put my crucible and cover on there, and then I'm going to write down that number as well. My setup for my first part of the lab is I'm going to have a Bunsen burner. So let's see if this will follow me over here. I'm going to light my Bunsen burner. In order to light my Bunsen burner, I'm going to start with my valve open, turn the gas on. Actually, before you do that, you want to make sure that your crucible fits in your clay triangle. So my setup looks like this. I have my ring stand, my clay triangle, and my crucible fits pretty good in there. I want to practice putting my top on so there's just a little bit of space for the air to get in as I'm heating my copper 2 sulfate. So that looks all good. I'm going to do that before things get hot. And actually, while I'm at it, I'm going to put my copper 2 sulfate right in there, good as I can, and I'm going to actually set this all up before anything gets hot. So now I can light my Bunsen burner. We just use matches. My valve is open. I'm going to turn my gas on and strike the match, maybe, and light my Bunsen burner. When we do this lab, we want to make sure that our flame isn't too hot. So I don't want it to get too close to my copper 2 sulfate. I could probably move it down a little bit. So I'm going to use my UV glove and just carefully unscrew this and move it down just a little bit so it's barely touching the bottom of my crucible. So what is going to happen is it's going to heat for a while, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to evaporate off the water. So I want you to take observations while this is happening with your UV glove on. Take a look. Is it changing color? Does it look any different throughout the time? Okay, so time has passed by. I think I'm just about done. It looks completely changed in color. I'm going to let it cool for a while, and then I'm going to mass it. Once I mass it, I'm going to actually put it back on here and heat it again for maybe a minute longer just to make sure all the water's evaporated, and I'm going to let it cool, and then I'm going to put it back on the scale. If the mass changed, that means it wasn't ready yet and you need to heat it again. You will keep doing that process until the mass doesn't change or time runs out in class. So that is going to be part one of the first experiment. The second part of the first experiment, which we might not get to right away, is we are going to react zinc with some hydrochloric acid. We are going to do it in an evaporating dish using a watch glass as a cover, and we're going to use the pipette to add it. So again, I'm going to mask my chunk of zinc, so open the door, hit 0, let that 0 out. Oops. I'm going to grab a small-ish chunk of zinc. It's not zeroed yet. Okay. There we go. Small-ish chunk of zinc. I want about a 0.4, and that's pretty close. So if you can take a look at how small of a piece that is, it's pretty teeny tiny. Okay? I'm going to take my zinc and place it into my evaporating dish. And the camera needs to turn. Here we go. I placed it in my evaporating dish. I'm going to take the top off of the 3 molar hydrochloric acid because we're going to use the pipette. And actually I'm going to put my watch glass on top of my evaporating dish because I don't want anything to fizz out. So I want to measure 10 milliliters of the 3 molar hydrochloric acid. So I'm just going to use the dial and suck up 10 milliliters. Remember, this is our excess reactant, so it doesn't have to be perfect because it's in excess. Okay? And then I'm just going to slowly release it little by little into my evaporating dish as the zinc reacts. It's bubbling up, so I'm going really slow with that watch glass. Sorry, you can barely see. Really slow with that watch glass on top of it, and I'm just going to let it react. And actually, this takes a significant amount of time, so I'm going to stop the video and let it finish. While it's reacting and finishing reacting, I've added all the hydrochloric acid. I'm going to take some observations, pay attention to all things qualitative. And then what I'm going to do, because we have excess hydrochloric acid and we have excess water, we are going to evaporate that off in the fume hood using a hot plate. So I'm going to take this carefully over to the fume hood, set it on the hot plate, and wait for it to all evaporate. Ooh, don't forget to mask your empty evaporating dish and watch glass. That's one thing I forgot to say.